As Cheryl was telling us earlier, our theme for this month at Tapestry is beauty. I'm glad that we're going to spend some time talking about a topic that gets short shrift in our adult lives. We encourage our kids to explore beauty through shapes and colors and patterns all the time. We know that it's important for them, but as soon as they become youth, we replace that exploration with more concrete learning. Guess what? We don't outgrow a fascination with the world. At least I hope not. We don't outgrow a desire to experience pleasure through all of our senses. Now, I believe that experiencing beauty is an essential piece of living full and satisfying lives. It's around us in a million different ways every day. Although we don't think about it too often, the way we see and appreciate the beauty in our world matters. My goal today is to invite you into noticing how you respond to your surroundings. What do you find beautiful and why? We all have implicit understandings of what we think is beautiful. A lot of them we just absorb from the culture around us. Others are very personal. Later, I'll tell you a little bit about what I think are characteristics of beauty. But really, my goal for today is for when we leave here, for all of us to pay a little more attention to what we see in the world. So to demonstrate some of the beauty that we might begin to recognize, I've collected some nature photography. This is pretty exquisite photography. And like most photography, what makes it special isn't just the subject. It's the photographer's ability to notice this particular moment and arrangement. Though the pictures I'm showing you come from nature, there are endless examples of the same things in our daily lives. Whether you're at the grocery store, in the Sierra Nevada mountains, at the Taj Mahal, or sitting at your desk, these arrangements of color and shape and light are there too. Maybe the most eye-catching thing for us humans in beauty is symmetry. I'm realizing that I may have, not symmetry, but texture. Another thing that we noticed beyond symmetry is texture. Some things are just so textured that you want to reach out and touch them. Maybe they're furry, maybe it's something rough, maybe the texture is hard and shiny like plastic, or maybe it's unbelievably hard. We might say as hard as a rock. We're surrounded by a great diversity of different textures and materials everywhere in our lives. Notice them, enjoy them. We're also deeply moved as humans by symmetry. I don't know why. One of my guesses is that it brings a little bit of order into our lives. It may be that we are symmetrical in our own bodies, but it's everywhere. I was noticing it just in the design of the things in my home. We really like symmetry for some reason. And when it comes to photography, one of the most important aspects of beauty to notice is light. Sometimes the source of light defines what we see in the object itself. And of course, light casts shadows. Shadows are probably the most ignored piece of beauty in our everyday lives. When was the last time you made a shadow puppet or noticed your silhouette accompanying you along the sidewalk? It's there, waiting to be noticed. In addition to that contrast between light and dark, we might also notice the contrast of size. Some of the most beautiful things around us are the most fragile. And some pieces of beauty around us offer large scales that defy our comprehension of size. We don't experience that intricacy and grandeur on an everyday basis, but when we do, it's worth pausing to appreciate. Sometimes beautiful images remind us of the changes in time, changes in season, and changes in the seasons of our lives. Beauty can remind us of how precious time is. Sometimes beauty just emerges in a very odd arrangement of subjects, whether that's in nature or in your life. They're funny situations. Enjoy the unlikely beauty of our lives. Sometimes beauty emerges through a repetition of things. Patterns emerge from a forest, from trees, from ferns. Maybe they emerge from a row of street lights or a box of pencils. The invitation to notice them is there. Pattern is all over the place. Finally, probably the most common thing we think about in beauty is color. Sometimes that color shows up in an ability to blend and match. Sometimes that color shows up in contrast. But it's all over the place. So like I said, these are some amazing photographs. I actually got them from the Sierra Club from a project called the Daily Ray of Hope. They email you a piece of nature photography every day. It's really delightful. We don't all get out into nature, but I use nature pictures for a particular reason, to remind us that these components of beauty emerge spontaneously. They're everywhere in the world. We can find texture, pattern, light in our kitchens. We see images of precious time when we see children or experience the seasons. It doesn't take professional photography to bring out the beauty of our lives. We just have to notice it. I learned how much power there is in appreciating things from my grandmother, actually. I was blessed to spend a good number of years with my grandmother growing up. She was a feisty woman, very kind, but a feisty Southern woman, and pretty modest. Like anyone of her age and generation, she would not leave the house without doing her hair and putting on some makeup. And that very time-consuming ritual seemed very strange to me as a 7-year-old boy, anxious to go out into the world and have adventures with Grandma. My brother and I would often tell her how pretty she was. Sometimes that was an attempt to speed up her beauty rituals. Other times it was genuine praise for a woman who offered an inexhaustible source of love. Every time we complimented her looks, she would tell us, "Beauty is in the eye of the beholder." We never understood her strange response as children. I guess she succeeded in diverting our attention, but that strange response stayed with me. I mean, she must have said it 100 times. And as I was thinking about it this week, I realized there are two possible interpretations of that common phrase. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I have a hunch that my grandmother, in her modesty, was suggesting that beauty is subjective. Everyone has different opinions about what is pretty in the world. One person's trash is another person's treasure, if you will. It kind of reduces beauty to a matter of personal preference and a pretty insignificant one at that. But I take a more connected approach to the saying, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. As we interact with the world, we have the opportunity to bestow beauty onto what is most fitting. Through our respect, we can elevate those things that are awe-inspiring and soul-filling. It's a great privilege and an opportunity to interact with our world that way. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It's in our eyes. I said earlier, my goal is to invite us into awareness about our own visual preferences, to notice what we find pleasurable. I also want to give you some of my thoughts about what I think compromises beauty. So my first point of reference for beauty is about diversity of the world and how relationships can accentuate the goodness of life. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about process theology. It's kind of complicated, but it's basically a belief that the world is unfolding through a process. In each moment of creation, God offers new opportunities for goodness to emerge. But that good is a very specific thing in process theology. The good is diversity and harmony. In process theology and in my own belief, diversity and harmony are inherently good things. I'm talking about human diversity and biological diversity. I'm talking about the various landscapes of our planet, the colors of the rainbow, all the shapes, patterns, sizes, textures we can imagine. Variety is the spice of life. Of course, we don't need all those options at once, though. Some combinations are pretty displeasing. Now, harmony isn't sameness. Harmony inherently relies on at least two different things working together, not outpowering each other. If variety is the spice of life, you want to pick those spices carefully. Think of curry powder or chili powder or apple pie spice or Cajun blackened seasoning. For diversity to create beauty, some harmony has to emerge out of the chaos. So that's my first piece of beauty, harmony and diversity. The second is creativity. Creativity is an essential component in beauty. In the natural world, we can appreciate the creativity of evolution and geology, the ridiculous array of organisms that have emerged over billions of years. That's amazing. And perhaps as amazing is our ability to join in a creative process. It's a huge part of what makes art interesting. It's not just skill. Really, great art doesn't just copy something else. Great art brings a new perspective into the world. I've tried to cultivate a sense of appreciation for contemporary art. It's not always easy. Occasionally, people will look at a blob on a piece of paper or an upside-down chair in the corner and say, I don't know what's special about that. I could have made that. And I have to remind myself, the point isn't whether or not you could have made it. The point is whether or not you had the creativity to come up with the idea. An artist imagined something new, a new arrangement of shape and color, or a new combination of materials, or a unique way of fabricating something. Sometimes contemporary art is eccentric. I will freely admit I sometimes scratch my head. I have to push myself to appreciate it. But creativity is inherently valuable. Another component is, in some ways, the opposite of creativity. Beauty isn't always about what's new and changing. It also is about what's permanent. Beauty reminds us of something bigger than ourselves. It reminds us of the sacred and the eternal. Earlier in the nature pictures, I spoke about the seeming timelessness of a mountain picture. I think that sense of the sacred is part of what we experience in the awe at mountains or the ocean or the desert. It's a very grounding experience, looking at something much larger and in scope than our own lives. Now, I've used the phrase life-affirming a few times today, and I want to be a little more specific about that. I firmly believe that beauty is life-affirming. In artistic terms, that means the picture being portrayed and the way that it's made. By life-affirming, I mean images that celebrate healthy ways of being in the world. I mean celebrating bodies, all types of bodies, as glorious as they are. By life-affirming, I mean images that celebrate human liberation. And it's not always pretty or comfortable. Some images bring to light the potential cruelty and exploitation that we have in us. They warn us about the shadow side of life, but there's beauty in telling some of those painful stories that shouldn't be repeated. These images serve to redirect us toward other alternatives. I also think there's something about beauty that's collaborative. For some reason, as I was thinking about collaborative beauty, the idea of a park bench came to mind, or really well-designed playground equipment. Maybe it's a favorite serving dish from a family that brings friends and family together around the table. Maybe it's an heirloom passed down generation to generation, linking the family. In so many different ways, objects can bring us together in relationship, and that's also part of their beauty. There are lots of different ways that we can see beauty in our lives. Before I wrap up, I need to remind you and myself that the opportunity to see beauty is a gift, one that we don't all share in equally. A handful of Tapestry members are living with glaucoma and other degenerative eye diseases. Even with corrective lenses, we're not all able to experience the visual beauty of the world. I can only imagine how frustrating that is. Fortunately, visual beauty is not the only kind of beauty in our lives. Each of our senses offers a gateway to experiencing the world. And just as we can cultivate an appreciation for visual beauty, we can also develop our other senses. We can be attuned to the intensity and the variety of experience. We can find beauty in the senses that remind us of the familiar, the eternal. It's said that the sense of smell, for some reason, is particularly well suited for evoking memories. We can also appreciate innovation as we savor new combinations of flavor or new types of music. And knowing the source of our enjoyment, we can appreciate its life-affirming qualities. That may be the happy noises of children, or knowing that the delicious piece of fruit was grown organically by local farmers. I talked about visual beauty today because it's the easiest to talk about and share in a room like this. I guess beauty isn't just in the eye of the beholder, it's in each of our senses. As we encounter the world with all our senses, let us find beauty and celebrate it. Because celebrating the good stuff matters. We have the opportunity to bestow beauty onto what is most fitting. That's a tremendous gift. Amen.